welcome to the episode wrap for Long After Dark, with my co-host and friend in California, John Paulsen.
Thanks for having me.
And there is a reason we're laughing, and you might find out at the end. But we got a record to talk about. Long After Dark. So let's do some vital stats on this one. So it's the last album on the Backstreet imprint before the move back to the parent MCA. Recorded at 4 studios: the Record Plant, famous record plant in Hollywood, Wally Hyder's in Hollywood, Crystal in Hollywood, and Rumbo in Los Angeles, elsewhere, not Hollywood, obviously. Again, produced by Jimmy Iovine and Tom Petty, engineered again by Shelley Yakis and Don Smith. Was released on November 2nd, 1982, and peaked at number 9 on the Billboard chart. Artwork by Tommy Steele from Steelworks. And I love the artwork for this one. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. Like, the inner sleeve is just as good as the outer. And then additional musicians on the album were Phil Jones on percussion again, and Ron Blair, who comes back to play bass on Between Two Worlds. There were 3 singles from the album: You Got Lucky, Change of Heart worldwide, and then Straight Into Darkness, which was released only in Europe. So yeah, those are vital stats. I've made just a real quick comment, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So that when I was kind of looking at the album as a whole, it's really sneakily strong. You know, when you actually go song by song, and it doesn't have the same number of hits that Damn the Torpedoes Hard Promises has, but it's almost more consistent in a way where there's not as much difference between the peaks and the troughs, right? So I had 4 7s, 3 8s, a 9, and a 10. I know that I usually rate higher than you, and a 6. So again, it's never overly average to my ear, but it doesn't shoot the lights out very often either. So it's one of those that you can sort of miss sometimes. So what were your thoughts when you went back and listened to it again?
So this is, again, a wonderful byproduct of doing this podcast with you, is that I'm going back and listening to these albums that I probably wouldn't listen to 10 or 15 times in a row, if not to do research and to really get a firm grasp on some of these album tracks that I haven't heard a whole lot. And this is certainly an album that, I knew casually. You Got Lucky, from radio airplay and from MTV airplay. I sort of discovered Change of Heart and Straight Into Darkness later on, as those were fan favorites and chart hits, which we'll get into. But then some of these album tracks, I maybe have heard it once or twice. When I went back initially and listened to all of his, all their albums, the Heartbreakers albums, throughout the whole discography. And, you listen to Long After Dark a couple times. Okay, now you're moving on to the next album to try to catch up. But really going through and listening to it over and over and over again, there were definitely some songs that stood out as surprises. And as we get into the producer of the day, because we do have a fun one this week with 3 extra stray tracks that were all quite good, and trying to incorporate those into the album really illuminated how difficult it is to maybe cut a song or two. And we can get into where I'm at with that. I'm not completely buttoned down my producer for a day set list, or playlist, but I do have a really good side A. But to underline your point, it's a really strong album. Like, even some of these album tracks, I don't think they're, filler or skippable. I think if I turned on this album, I would just listen to it front to back and probably wouldn't skip any of the tracks, because they're all pretty solid.
Absolutely. And so right out the gate, he talks about One Story Town. Comes out the gate all guns blazing, right? Like, it's a nice upbeat, up-tempo opener, and it's got a great duality of meaning in that title line, One Story Town. So straight away, we're getting a real Tom Petty song. Yeah,
and I think this one was primarily written by Tom. I don't think Mike Campbell has a co-credit on that one, but it is an upbeat one. I really like the chorus, and then I think my only problem with it is that the verses, the vocalization that Tom's using, it sounds like he's trying to do his Dylan impression. So
right.
I'm not like Dylan's fine. Like, he's a very good songwriter and everything. I don't like listening to him sing over, very much.
Yeah.
Outside of some of his best songs. So that is the one downer for me on this one, is that I think I don't know if he's trying to do it, or if this was just like his way he wanted to express this particular song, but not my favorite vocalization from Tom on the verses. Really good chorus though. I mean, it is a rocker. I like the noodling that Mike adds during the chorus.
Yeah.
And this was one that got some radio airplay apparently.
Yeah, I think with his voice, it's that thing of when you're singing from a position of a character rather than yourself, which Tom, did in different ways. And he definitely used that voice, on several tracks. Almost on Refugees, it's not quite the same, but it's that really pinched, tightened up delivery where his throat's almost, he's choking his throat up. So I totally understand that. Yeah, and if that's not your bag, then of course that's gonna change a little bit, but I don't mind. I think it works for the song, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'll for the producer of a day segment, I'll be picking a different album opener, which I think you'll find it interesting. But it's a good one for what they were trying to do. I mean, you look at this album, it's Jimmy Iovine's third with the band. So, and I think the relationship was getting a little bit stale as I read up on that record and how everybody feels about the record all these years later. But what I think Jimmy Iovine was trying to do was make a rock record, an 80s rock record, and maybe Tom had some different ideas, which we'll get into.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about different ideas, straight onto track two, You Got Lucky. And of course, you can't talk about that song without maybe even first talking about that video, because it just changed everything, right? I mean, you've got a minute before the song even comes in. So that was pure gold for the MTV generation when I think it was 2 years later or whatever, when they actually really sort of blew up. But they've got this video there now that tells this story and its narrative, and it's not a band on stage just playing with the wind blowing and girls dancing. So, and then you get into the song, as Tom said to Paul Zollo, and he says, you know what that song is? It's a perfect little single. When I hear it on the radio, I think, wow, we really just filled every little space in the right way.
Yeah, he said it was a really good pop record, but we rarely play it anymore. So they didn't play it a whole lot in concert. I'm trying to remember if I heard it live. I mean, I've seen him 10 times at least, yeah. And I'm not sure that I remember him playing it live. You mentioned the video, definitely like artistic, something new. I think Tom was very proud of the fact that they had this whole like mini film prior to the song even starting.
Yeah.
He did mention that they had recorded videos, but they weren't really called videos. They were little films for different songs that they've recorded prior to this. And then this sort of blew up on MTV, and a lot of those older songs, I think, got some airplay and made him more of a household name. And really, he mentioned that with You Got Lucky, that he would start to get recognized on the street. Like the MTV was just getting huge, and he was becoming a lot more famous because of it. It's the 18th most streamed song, slightly ahead of Listen to Her Heart, and the 10th highest charting single, peaking at 20. I just wanted to mention those two facts. Definitely like one of these early hits of his that definitely belongs on the greatest hits and in the pantheon of Tom Petty.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's 18th in streams. I don't know why, but that just surprises me a little bit, because it's a great song, but it's so unusual. It's so unpetty in a lot of ways, right? Sonically, it just doesn't sound like anything they've even come close to recording before. I'm kind of surprised that's so high. I was just looking up at the live performances, and they did play. It looks like they played it on the anniversary tour, the 40th anniversary tour.
Oh,
and then they played it a bunch in '99. But not much after 92. So it was, after 92, it was at 37 plays in 99 and 35 in 2017.
I'll have to check that set list that my son got from the anniversary tour. One of the roadies gave him a set list to see if they played it that night, because I don't remember it, but maybe they did.
Yeah. Okay, Deliver Me, track 3, midpoint on side 1.
I would say it's a solid track. I like the guitar in the intro. I listened to it again this morning, and I wrote paint by numbers petty. So that's not a bad thing. That's him kind of dipping into his knowledge and his bag. I don't think it's anything crazy special, but it's a solid album track. I wouldn't skip it. I think it would make my alternate playlist if I was producer for a day.
And yeah, so it's funny because when I did my episode on this, when I actually wrote, it definitely follows a trusted template. And because of that, I think it can be slightly overlooked, right? But it is catchy. It's one of those earworms that it kind of sits, and that chorus is really hummable, and, so I don't mind it, but I would agree, like, it's an album track. It's definitely, you would never release that as a single. And yeah, we'll have to see when we get to the producer for a day, because we've got time constraints on that vinyl. We're going on vinyl, so... Okay, second single from the album, or was it the first Change of Heart? Second single, right? Or third if you count Straight into Darkness in Europe, I think. I think it was the third.
Oh wow, yeah. I think it's from my list here. You Got Lucky, and then Change of Heart came
Yeah.
after.
So in the US, it would have been the second. So yeah, and I'd written down just the riff. It's a great little
Oh,
riff. And Tom, talks about he wasn't sold on that one and didn't love it, and said it wasn't one of his best songs. But I think it's one of those ones that the strength of it is in its simplicity. So just let the riff drive the melody. That rhythm section just keeps everything high tempo and danceable, and then the lyrics tell that story of sort of disenfranchisement and loneliness, right? So I think it's one of those that is better than maybe he was too close to it and just couldn't appreciate it as much as the rest of us do.
yeah. I think this is one that was under the radar for me. I didn't hear a whole lot on the radio, although it did well.
Yeah,
Um, but it was sort of one I've heard after I became a big fan of his. So it was, and to me, it sounded like ELO. And then it was interesting to see him admit that, or like
yeah,
just say it outright, that I was trying to do Jeff Lynne, because those crunchy guitars are so distinctly ELO, but he makes it his own with, the Heartbreakers makes it their own with the way they play and his vocals.
yeah,
You could argue, and I think you mentioned this I listened to a few of the episodes from this season, but I didn't want to listen to all of them because I like to hear your thoughts
yeah,
organically on some of these album tracks. But arguably should have been on maybe the top song that should have been on the greatest hits that was left off.
yeah.
Jam and Me peaked at 18. Change of Heart peaked at 21. And there's a few others which we'll talk about in future episodes, but
Yeah.
as to what should have made it and what didn't. And there was room on the CD that he could have added, or they could have added some of these tracks. And this is definitely one that catchy enough, did well enough on the charts that you could make a strong case for it. It's a really good track.
Yeah, it's a good song. Like I said, it's I don't know. It's one of those songs that no, I don't think it's not. I was gonna say I forget about it sometimes, but that's not quite true because it's on all my playlists. I have it on everything. But again, it's one that when it comes on, I'm like, I always forget how much I like this song, and I do. I really, really like this song, and I give it an 8 out of 10. Again, he's not blowing the doors off creatively with this one. He's not it's not one of Tom's songs that's going in a completely different direction, but it does everything that the Heartbreakers do. Everything the Heartbreakers does well. Like every part of it's really, really good. And like you said, yeah, it's borrowing a little bit of that sort of the riff from ELO, and it's taking little bits and pieces. And again, there's Byrds influences that filter through. Now, once I started listening to the Byrds, you hear a lot more of it in Tom's music, but it's always got that Heartbreaker spin. So yeah, I think it's a super, super solid track.
And I would say it's one that, Tom wanted to explore. Just reading between the lines and doing the research for this podcast regarding this album, reading between the lines, Tom wanted to explore maybe different sounds, different styles,
Yeah.
more than what Jimmy wanted. But this was one where Jimmy's like, okay, this is a good rock song, so we can include it. But it's not a traditional Heartbreakers song. So I think that's probably the background to it in terms of what got it on the album. But you can hear, along with the B-sides or the leftover tracks, that Tom was trying to do some different things and didn't want to make another Hard Promises. And I think that's what Jimmy wanted to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I still think though that it is different enough. Like again, like you read through, and before I started doing the songs on this album, read through that background and look at those comments that Tom makes, and he makes it several times talking about each individual song with Paul Zollo. But again, I think there is a ton of growth on this. There is stuff on here that is very, very different. There's even like I can't remember which song it is, but I think, is it maybe Between Two Worlds or Same Old You maybe, where Mike does this big epic hair metal pick slide into his solo or out of his solo, and he never uses that. And I can't think. So there's little elements coming into this record that they're definitely not. It's not carbon copy of Hard Promises in any way, to my ear.
I think talent-wise, this is the band hitting and still at its peak.
Yeah.
Not that they don't peak again later, but this is a really strong band at this point. Very strong.
For sure. Okay, the closer on side one is the song that I rated the lowest when I went through Finding Out. But it does have a brilliant it's one of those very, very clever Tom Petty lyrical twists. So in the first verse, he sings, "I must be looking over something," rather than overlooking something. And it's just that little bit of wordplay that just changes sort of the meaning of that line, even though he's actually singing it the other way. So it's got that, again, that duality of meaning. Just always one of those people who's just very careful. And when those opportunities arise lyrically, he would always take them, right? And always, but wouldn't overdo them.
So that's interesting that this is one of your, or this is the one you lowest rated the lowest.
Yeah.
I didn't. I would still include it on my alternate playlist, but it's definitely not like the strong, up there with the strongest tracks. It's another rocker. I do like the call and response between Tom and the rest of the band, whoever's doing backup vocals there. I think it's kind of a banger. I wouldn't say it's a full banger, but it's a solid album track. I wouldn't skip this one if it came on.
And you can see, we're talking about if Jimmy wants to do another rock album, you can see definitely why that gets included, right? Because it fits that template very, very well.
Yeah, I think there's a few of these, and you maybe Deliver Me so far, One Story Town, Finding Out, that got picked over some because they're kind of rockers.
Yeah.
And they got picked over some of these other tracks for that reason, just primarily for that reason, because I would say objectively, 2 or 3 of the songs that were left off are better. But it's also, you almost hear like Wildflowers era, Full Moon Fever era Petty coming out in those B-sides. And we'll talk about that. But I could see Jimmy just like forcing these tracks in, Finding Out, Deliver Me, and One Story Town specifically. But they all have some good aspects to them that make them very listenable.
Absolutely. And that's, we talk about this lots as fans of Tom Petty. Even an average Tom Petty or a slightly below average Tom Petty song is still pretty freaking good usually. There's no real absolute stinkers in the catalogue, which makes sort of, doing what I'm doing, going through, is, oh man, I'm rating. I can't find a 4. I think I rated 1 4 maybe, but that might be the lowest I ever go, because there's nothing that sucks. There's just some stuff that's maybe a little bit, if I don't like the arrangement or it feels a little bit unfinished or whatever, but it's never bad.
Yeah, I think they strive to have quality. Everything they put out be quality.
Yeah.
And sometimes if they did miss the mark, it was still pretty good.
Well, Tom even said that, right? I think that's in Paul's book as well. He says, like, we went in with the attitude that every song we write, we try to make it better than the last one, and that's not always going to be the case. But if you go in with that intention, then you should at least have some sort of automatic quality control there, that you're not going to just screw, that'll do. I mean, that'll do. That's good enough. I don't think that ever came out of Tom's mouth.
So We Stand a Chance, right, is next. So this is another one that got some radio airplay. It peaked at 37 on the rock chart according to Music VF. And it was interesting to read, I think in the book, that the people around the band, or Jimmy or some people in the band, thought that this was going to be the one that fans gravitated to.
Right.
And instead it was You Got Lucky. And this is one where it's one of a couple that I might leave off. So I'm trying to decide, but the fact that they thought it was that good, gives me pause, and I keep listening to it, trying to hear what they heard in terms of it. Oh, we're going to release this as a single and it's going to be a big hit. I don't see it that way. I think it's all right. I think it's solid. I think there's parts of it maybe are just the repetitiveness in the second half of the song, where they keep saying we stand a chance, over and over again. It just gets a little bit grating for me. So this is one that I'm kind of thinking about leaving off if I have to deal with the LP vinyl time constraints of 1982.
That's interesting, yeah, because it's one of those that the opening, like that opening 4 bars, whatever, is that down with the big piano hits and that, and like it just, again, doesn't sound like anything else. The guitar tone's great, and it's as a sort of opener for side 2 of an album. When you flip the record and you put this on, it's sort of in that same space for me as Need to Know, where to me it comes out really fresh and really, really cool. So yeah, that's interesting that it's one of the ones that you're kind of wavering on. So I don't know, man. I think it's a good song.
Yeah, I mean, I think the band agreed with you. I mean, I'd be interested to hear those conversations as to who was really pro this song and who thought that this was really going to take off. But they didn't end up releasing it as a proper single, as far as I know. So at some point that must have died. The whole idea must have died.
Well, that comes down to at that point, that's out of the band's control, really, because that now is to what a DJ's playing, what are people requesting, all those kinds of things. And of course, you got lucky. Again, it's so different that if you're not a Tom Petty fan, I think maybe you got lucky more than you would like. We stand a chance because it's just a bit different. It's got a bit more of an 80s vibe to it with the synth, so I to understand that. But yeah, I'd be kind of curious to hear who makes those decisions, because the band definitely would have a say, but not the final say, right? Because it is the company that decides. It's their money that they're putting these singles out. It is really the company that decides that. So,
well, yeah, but and then the interesting thing is that it didn't get released as a proper single, but it did appear on the rock chart. So DJs must have been playing it,
yeah,
somewhere, at least to get it charting. But they just still didn't decide to try to release it as a proper single, give it kind of the publicity it needed to get to take off.
Yeah. All right. So, next track on the album is, I think, the strongest on the album, Straight Into Darkness.
It's up there. It's really, I mean, when Bruce Springsteen pulls you aside and tells you how good of a song it was,
yeah,
that's a pretty good song. It has more streams than Change of Heart, which is interesting, given that Change of Heart was a bigger hit.
Yeah.
But Straight Into Darkness, not really pushed as a single. You said there was maybe a European release of it. Yeah, I love this song. I think it's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, on the album. And it was one that I got into later. It would be played sometimes live, fan favorite. It kind of reminds me, its trajectory kind of reminds me of Insider, where it's not a total banger or anything like that, kind of a more pensive song.
Yeah.
I think Tom would call it ballad. I don't think this really qualifies as a ballad, but not like your typical radio friendly hit.
Yeah.
But it becomes a fan favorite and ends up on some of these other anthologies and things, because I think that the band really liked this song, and justifiably. I mean, it's really a well-crafted, Tom Petty at his peak songwriting type song.
Absolutely. And that lyric, that last verse, is just, I don't believe the good times are over. I don't believe the thrill is gone. Real love is a man's salvation. The weak ones fall, the strong carry on. It's just one of those epic, brilliant, and I'm sure it feels like that feels like a one shot to me. That feels like something that he probably that came quite easily and quite quickly, because it's got that natural organic feel to it, where it doesn't look like it's sort of contrived or put together. So to be able to, again, just the guy to write something like that is just phenomenal. And Mike's guitar, I love in this song too. The little lick, Straight Into Darkness, where it changes to the major key, is super, super cool. I don't know if did you read Megan Volpert's book yet? Did you pick that book up? Definitely do it. You'll enjoy it. Like, it's, I mean, talk about doing a deep dive on something. Writing a full book basically on one song is pretty, and there's some essays in there and some other stuff in there as well, but and she digs into the lyrics hardcore and gets into the philosophy of them, which is super cool. And one of the other things reading Paul's book that I found really interesting, just on a sort of a musician standpoint, is Tom says you couldn't really get everyone grooving the same way until we went over to the piano. And then as soon as you start the song on the piano, that's where everyone instinctually found what to play. So again, it shows that even the best can sort of struggle with the best way to play a song. And I think that's, what was the song off the outtake that ended up on Down the Torpedoes, or on the extended
Surrender
version? Yeah, Surrender. It's one of those, same thing, right? So we've got this song, we know it works, we know the bones are there, we just can't find the right skin and clothes to put over top of it, right? So
Straight Into Darkness is the type of song that he has a lot in his catalog where it wasn't a hit. Like, so he has his layer of hits that were super popular that casual Tom Petty fans know, but there's this whole other subsection of songs that are just fantastic songs that would, if you just took away all of his hits and you had these 20 or 30 songs, like Straight Into Darkness, like Insider, and there's more, Surrender is another. So if you just looked at that, that would be like a major career for any other artist. Just that selection of 20 or 30, like the greatest hits of any other artist. So that's what makes Tom's music so amazing, and his discography so amazing, is that it's just levels and levels and levels of these wonderful songs. And that even as a casual fan, you start to dig into them, all of a sudden you have 20 or 30 more favorites that you didn't even know about before.
Yeah. Well, your Tom Petty playlist only ever grows, right? You only ever add to that. You never subtract. It's one of those things.
Sure.
And this is one that, again, obviously, I'd heard this a couple times and sort of, playing Long After Dark because I like the album and it becomes part of the album, so you don't always necessarily listen to each individual song very, very closely. But just sitting down and listening to this over and over and over again, it's like, this is like one of his top shelf songs, in my opinion. Like, it's so perfect and everywhere. There's no fat in it. Every note's exactly where it needs to be. It's got a really cool message. Like I said, the lyrics are fantastic. And then again, that duality of it can be about a relationship, but it can also be about where they were as a band. Tom's talking about it. We've got this creative sort of separation between us and the producer. There's some stuff going on. Stan's getting a little bit edgier, and there's lots of stuff. Those internal dynamics going on. Well, how do we manage that? And Straight into the Darkness is, well, it's the unknown. We don't know what's out there. So
yeah, and you could. The title is a little bit like, oh, this is going to be kind of a downer song.
yeah,
But you mentioned the optimism, and I just wanted to highlight that because there are, I think, all the B-sides, unreleased tracks were pretty optimistic, and I think the fact that they were not included made this maybe album more of a downer or a little bit darker than what Tom was feeling at the time or what
yeah.
he wanted it to be.
When he said too, I can't remember which song it was on in Paul's book, but he says like he would never write when he was depressed or when he was unhappy. He only ever wrote music when he was happy, because he said it just doesn't work for me. I can't write when I'm unhappy. And so even, and like you said, you got Straight into Darkness, but the next line is out over the line. So you're talking about going into darkness and uncertainty, but you're talking about coming through it. So if you take that title in isolation, yeah, it can be a downer, but in the context of the whole lyric, less so, I think so. Same old you. I think you'd flagged this one up when we were messaging back and forth.
I love this song.
Yeah.
Love it. Now, my relationship to it is extremely interesting because I really don't know how much I've heard it prior to this experience. And then I noticed Mike's guitar riff at the start of it, which I loved.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that it was one of 4 songs from the album that made the playback box set. So that gets me wondering about the story of the song, or how did it make the box set? Why did it make the box set? So I listened to it over and over again. I'm like, this is a rocker. Like, this is to me, this is the album opener. So like, I think you start with this and you don't really, you're not making a 1982, Jimmy Iovine rock record. It's got a little bit of the bluesy roots rock that Tom and Mike like to play so much and have played so much. And I think this track, if it opened the album, would be able to send this album into multiple different directions. And you'll see with my side A that I think it really works well with the tracks that come after it.
Okay. Yeah, to say it's a bit bluesy, this is just straight. It's Rolling Stones, man. It's Keith and Mick, right? It's got that strut to it. It's got that swagger. And again, it's a weird one too, because as I was listening through and I sat down at the keyboard to figure out what key it's in and some of the chord changes, and it's in C. And guitarists don't write blues licks in C. They write them in A or E or G, because those are the ones on the guitar where your fingering is the easiest and it's easiest to get around and the scales are more natural. To write in C, again, it's just, that's Mike Campbell. I've got it in C. I will just play it in C, Or maybe,
Yeah, it's one of these unknown, I guess, Mike Campbell riffs.
Yeah,
like the general public doesn't know about this riff, but I think it's just wonderful. I listened to it like 10 times in a row at one point. I was like, this is and it's a cracking song too. Like the way it's just a rocker. Now I think Tom maybe says it wasn't too serious and everything, which is fine. I don't think you necessarily, every song doesn't have to be like, something super serious, but I don't know if he took it as seriously as maybe it deserved to be, but it did end up on the box set. So I'm interested if that was Mike saying, no, I really like this. This is one of my favorites that I've written, and maybe Mike pushed for it to be on there. I'd love to know the story behind that.
Yeah, and like I said, the nice thing about that is because it is you've used the word throwaway. It's not a serious song. It's just it's a blues jam. It's a rock and roll blues jam. But when you put it after Straight into Darkness and you do lift a bit of that tension, it's a good sort of release of some of that, right? But I don't dislike the idea of opening the album with it either. That's when we get into that. I'm very easily persuaded on that one, I think. Okay, so another Mike Campbell song comes after it, Between Two Worlds. A lot more guitar in this one as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering as I looked at the credits if Tom didn't want Mike to open, but I don't think he has a problem with Mike's being co-written and opening albums with his songs as well, because it does seem like a few of them were kind of on the second side. But I think Between Two Worlds is another one that really surprised me as I listened to it. I love the piano guitar opening.
Yeah.
Stan's drums are really good on this. Again, it was not one that was listed as a single on Music VF, but it did peak at 35 on the rock chart, so it must have gotten some airplay as well. So, but this is one that is maybe a little bit darker.
Yeah.
It feels kind of menacing, but I really dig it.
One, it's got a really sleazy, sort of lazy tempo to it, right? You could definitely play that song 10 BPM faster and it would cook even more maybe, but when you slow it down, it gives it a bit more, it's just
groove.
A bit more groove. And Mike's solo, the tone in his solo is just so sexy. Like, it's incredible. It's got that, you can tell he's playing that. When you actually listen to it, you can tell that's not going through an effects unit to get that reverb and to get, the tone. That's an amp placed 15 feet away from everything else, and a mic, mic'd quite far away to get that natural room reverb. And it just, man, it's the best part of the song for me. And it's a great song all the way through. Great bridge. That bridge takes it in a different direction. When that solo kicks in, it's like, oh, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. And it's long too, right?
That bridge is really good.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
That key changes. And it goes, again, unheartbreaker-ish chords, right? You go, that's a weird change. I've not heard him go to the minor third instead of the minor sixth there, which is what you're expecting. And it changed. It's super, super cool.
Man, the things you hear in these songs, minor third to minor.
But it's those things of, I was when I'm kind of picking them apart and listening to them, and you listen to, I'm just listening to the guitar, and I'll listen through a couple times and just listen to the guitar, or just listen to the rhythm guitar and then the lead guitar, and then listen to the organ. And when you put them all together, it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So Benmont's actually playing a fifth there. He's just playing the root note and the fifth, and then you get either the third or the minor third being thrown in on the guitar. So it kind of, you can make it sound like a minor key without it actually really being in a minor key. So that's where you get that pensive thing from, right? So that's the technical bullshit and things. So yeah, but it's a lot of fun listening for those things, and they are in every song. There's something in more or less every song where you think that's quite clever. That
I would say this one too, Between Worlds, is not something that we've heard from them before. Like that, It seems like a new style for them, and I think it fit within what Jimmy wanted to do, at least enough to get it on the second half of the album.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really strong track. I like it a lot.
Yeah, like I said, it's 5 minutes. How long is it? Because that's one of my notes that I'd made in Producer for a Day is
5:10.
It's 5:10, yeah. So you think, well, if you just sort of trimmed a little bit off the outro there, because it's just a fade out, we could save a little bit of time there and maybe squeak another song on. So maybe we'll get into that.
And that was Ron Blair on bass.
Ron Blair on bass coming back. And again, I think we talked on, there was a song where Duck Dunn comes in on Hard Promises.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of said surprised me a little bit, because that wasn't a bass line that needed, Duck Dunn's funk coming in. Woman in Love. That's a pretty straight bass line. Where this one is more funky, and it's got a bit more groove to it. So to bring Ron back in for that's interesting. So I don't know. I kind of wonder partially if this was something that they had kicking around during the Hard Promises sessions, but maybe Tom didn't have lyrics, or it wasn't finished, or Mike just had the riff. You know what I mean? So I wonder if it's something along those lines where, well, Ron knows this one, knows how to play it. I'm kind of curious to find out if that's the case.
For sure.
Or if he was just hanging around the studio, which is more likely, right? Hey, Ron, pick up a bass. So the closer, A Wasted Life. What do you think?
Yeah, and I like the pensive closer. Now this is a little bit different than what I'm maybe used to. We didn't get a minute like weird sound effect prior, so that's good. It's different than the rest of the album. I watched a live performance too, and he played it, I think, at the close of the concert, the show, and just kind of dedicated it to all the fans, which I thought was interesting, dedicating A Wasted Life to all the fans. I just thought that was funny. I don't know. I would love to hear like a demo of it with just him on the guitar too. Like, I think some of the stuff sounds a little 80s, like early 80s, but it's also when you listen to it, it's, I think there's organ on it, or there's some kind
Yeah.
of key on it. That if it's not there, then it would change the song and the sort of memory of the song. But I would also like to just hear Tom with a guitar, or even Tom on a piano, just playing this as a straight ballad, or maybe with a little bit of drum or percussion here and there. But this is also one that is not doesn't blow me away. So this is one that I would perhaps cut if I had to.
Yeah.
But I do like the pensive closer, as you know.
Well, and I'd kind of written down about the keyboards in the episode, and again, something that I'd love to ask someone someday if I ever get to speak to Benmont. Maybe, well, he would be able to tell me. It's two keyboards. There's two keyboard parts in this, and you've got that big sort of that textural synth in the background. And my guess is that it's Tom playing that Prophet synth and putting those pads in the background while Benmont's playing lead, that little lead line, because there's only one guitar in it until really close to the end. And they did say that this was one that was basically cut live off the floor. So, like I said, I think that might be Tom and Benmont two-handing the keyboards. Benmont could definitely play both parts because it's not a complex part, but the fact that there's only one guitar part makes me think that maybe that's what that was.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's got that Tropicana kind of Jimmy Buffett kind of feel to it. I just think it's a cool little. You could sit on the beach and drink beer to that song all day long, right?
Yeah, I think it's a cool song. I don't know that I would want it on the album that I would want this album to be, if that makes sense. So if I did, I'd want it in a different format. I think I would love to hear the, home recording like they did for Wildflowers, all those tracks, like the home recording for A Wasted Life. Not that it exists necessarily, but it would be cool to hear just Tom sing it straight.
Yeah, it's like, what was the No Second Thoughts? Same thing, right? We'd said like the live version would be worth, because I don't think I've listened to the live version of A Wasted Life. So again, it might change it up a little bit. And if you just, I don't know, does he play both keyboard parts?
I don't see him. I don't, as I remember the video, and I might be wrong, but I think he's just staying there with his guitar singing. So I think maybe Benmont's playing both.
Okay, so we get to, like you said, we've got some outtakes from this album that are slightly surprising, that they didn't either make the album itself or didn't make, there's not even a B-side. None of these are even a B-side to one of the singles, which is really quite surprising. So the first one, which did get released on, was that on playback or was that on the Keeping Me Alive? Or was that just American Treasure?
Keeping Me Alive was released on playback.
On playback, okay.
Yeah.
Because there were two released on playback and one...
Yeah, Keeping Me Alive was released on playback and an American Treasure.
Yeah.
Keep a Little Soul was released on American Treasure, not on playback. And then Turning Point was released on playback and not American Treasure. And Turning Point is not available on Spotify. I don't think it's available on the streaming services. So it's the one's a little tougher to find if you don't have the playback box set.
Yeah, so Keep a Little Soul. Great little song.
So, this was released, 2018 when American Treasure came out, and it just, to me, sounds so timeless. It sounded like it could have been recorded in 2010 or any year, 2015. And all of a sudden, I looked and I was like, it's 1982. Like this is coming out of the Long After Dark sessions. I think if you look at these three songs as a whole, it's clear that Tom wanted this album to go in a different direction. And reading between the lines, I think that underlines it. But if you add these into this album, you have a totally different album.
Yeah.
It's not so much a early 80s rock record as it is an exploration into roots rock, but then also just the band flexing their muscles in all these different directions.
Yeah.
But I think I talked about I wanted to underline your optimism comment about Straight Into Darkness. All three of these songs are really optimistic.
Yeah.
If you look at the lyrics, they're all about, getting through some adversity, but coming out the other end. And Keep a Little Soul is just the band, I think, at some of their best. Like, this is one of those great unreleased tracks that could have been a hit. And I think it did get some radio airplay, at least on Sirius, the Spectrum channel,
right,
and all that. So just Keep a Little Soul is just a great little like ditty, and it's the band just having fun. And I think it's a really good track. It's one of my favorites. Certainly one of my favorite tracks that got released later that, were from these earlier sessions.
Yeah, and did you look? Have you seen the video? Right, they released because Adria Petty put together a video from home footage, and it's we all get caught. Well, I get caught up, especially when I'm doing my podcast, in the mystique and the detail of Tom's music. But sometimes it's good to remember that when you watch him play, he just loved rock and roll. And every part of his being, and the song's a good example of just it's simple. In most ways, it's a fun rock and roll song, but it is still it's a rock and roll song in that old tradition. Like
Yes.
your Chet Atkinses and all those kinds of people, where, like you said, and I think that's maybe where, because it doesn't have more meat on its bones, maybe that's where Jimmy Iovine says, well, it doesn't have the same sort of gravitas that some of these other songs, so that's maybe why that gets cut from the album. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's something that they could have, squeaked by Jimmy in the 70s.
Yeah.
But quote unquote classic rock. I mean, it's now classic rock, but Tom Petty coming up in the late 70s, also, the Stones, the Beatles had long since broken up,
Yeah.
but it's going through a weird time in those early 80s. And I think that there was probably a push and pull with what they thought was commercial
Yeah.
versus what maybe are the best songs. So like Tom referred to Keeping Me Alive and Turning Point in the book as country songs. That's what Jimmy called them. He didn't view them that way at all.
Yeah.
But Tom does come from Florida, comes from the South, so his roots are going to sound a little bit country, even if it's just an acoustic rock song or something along those lines. So definitely a push and pull with what was left off and what was released, and it could have been a very different album.
Yeah, definitely. And Keep a Little Soul. I really like the vocal performance on this one. And it's got those great doubled vocals where Tom's singing his own harmonies, but then when you get into the chorus, that it doesn't matter. Those lines, I'm pretty sure that's how Ian Stan. That call and response again, I'm pretty sure that's how Ian Stan, because that doesn't sound like Tom's voice at all. So again, you've got these two now. He's got these two guys who can sing harmonies for him and can sort of fill and pad out that sound. But yeah, with the country stuff, that comment about this country influence, but Keeping Me Alive definitely has that flavor to it. It's probably the most southern rock song that he'd written. Maybe Louisiana Rain you could throw into that category too a little bit, but it almost reminds me, like the guitar solo especially reminds me of Fogerty, and it's got that CCR vibe to it, which and the same breaks and pushes in the chord changes that CCR would use. So, and again, the organ's great on the outro, and it's got that rock and roll finish instead of a fade. So there's everything about Keeping Me Alive I just adore, and it is a song that they played live. They did play it live.
They did play it live, and I think on the outtake recording, I think there's a little piece, I might be misremembering, but there's a little piece at the end where he was like happy with the, you could hear Tom like say something nice about the song after the fact, or maybe it was a video that I saw of them in the studio playing it. But it's not country, but it does have that flavor, and it's like I think there's some crossover between Southern rock and country, and Tom is this, if you think about his whole trajectory of his career, is a weird amalgamation of everything, because he's the Southern rocker. Mudcrutch is very much in that vein. Went to California, fell in love with the state, changed his sound a little bit, but then was also inspired about the things going on around him, and inspired by the state of California and the music of California and the birds and all that kind of stuff. And then getting into his career, where he's never been about one kind of sound. He just explores all these different things based on whatever song he's trying to write at that particular time. And a lot of it gets released and some of it doesn't. But this Keep a Little Soul and Keeping Me Alive just sound so good. You crank those up and they just sound so good.
Yeah, and I wasn't into him at the time, but so I don't remember Playback coming out. Which did you, when it comes out, is that sort of, you remember? And so the first time you hear that, you're like you said, like, what the hell? Why was this not on an album? Or why was this not released? It's just mind blowing, right? And there's loads of those songs.
Yeah, there's 15 of those songs where you're like, how did this not make an album? And then you're also looking at it, going back and thinking about the albums, and you're like, well, I like these 3 or 4 songs, but I don't know these other ones, and like I love these, so why?
Yeah.
I think it's especially prevalent in the sessions after this album that there's just a lot of really great tracks that were left off, and this is like, I think really the start of it to me is there's just 3 really good ones that should have been included.
When you talk about, we said that Petty always was brilliant at bringing his influences into the Heartbreaker sound rather than ever parodying, a different band sound. And Turning Point is it's very Birds-esque to me. It's got that same feel. And I was thinking too, you could almost even imagine this one as a Wilbury song. It's got the harmonica in there. If you added some horns in there or something, you had that little Wilbury shuffle to it. It would have fit on volume 3 pretty well, I think.
Yeah, and they've got some harmonica. I don't think
Yeah,
there was any other harmonica on this album. So you can see how it didn't fit with what the
yeah,
producer was trying to do. Another, it's upbeat acoustic jam, and I think it's really optimistic as well because they're talking about. If you look at the lyrics, he's talking about kind of going through a lot of hard times with his girlfriend, I think,
yeah.
and that she stuck by him, or that there was ups and downs, but then they were reaching a turning point, and to where their relationship is going to be better from now on. I think it's the third one of this trio that they're all optimistic in terms of relationships and how they can kind of progress over time.
And the only thing the only detraction on this one for me, and when we get into that, this is one that I wouldn't necessarily put on the album. Is just that it doesn't really go anywhere. Like it's got one speed and it kind of sticks to it, and it's a short song. It's 2:55, but it just lacks that little bit of something to just kind of give you a bit of a spark in the middle or a bit of a kick in the middle or something, right? So that's the only thing that I said. The only thing I would knock about it. So
I think it's a good track. I probably would find a way to include it because it is different, and
yeah,
I think if with what I did with the front side of my custom playlist for this album, I would want to continue that on the second half, and I think that this Turning Point does
okay.
do that. But I do agree that I think Keep a Little Soul and Keeping Me Alive are superior tracks.
Well, we've been through all the songs now, so now we can get into our hatchet job on the album and the track list order and all those kinds of things. So I'll let you go first. Hit me with
Okay.
what you got.
All right. So we did. I don't think we did this very much for the last album, so I hope all the listeners can bear with us. But I would like anybody that's hardcore and wants to listen to this album in maybe a different way, at least put these 6 songs together on a side A, starting with The Same Old You. As I mentioned, I think the Mike's riff at the start is just a great way to start this album, and really kind of just slapped the listener aside the head and said, "You need to listen to this. You need to listen to this side of the album." And then I think You Got Lucky is an interesting transition from that, so I'd like to keep that at 2, and then Change of Heart at 3. So right there, you've got 3 pretty good rockers, and 3 that could be singles. I think certainly You Got Lucky and Change Your Heart could be. At 4, I would put Keep a Little Soul to try to change things up a little bit, a little more piano there, I think, coming off of Change of Heart. So I think with those first 4 tracks, you've got a wide variety of music, and I think the listener is at this point open-minded. Keeping Me Alive at 5. So now we're just into an acoustic kind of, as you mentioned, country feel to it, but not full country. And then close the first album side with Straight Into Darkness. So I think those 6 tracks really strong. I like to get the good stuff up front. But this is one that I think if you listen to the lyrics too, it really it could be a little microcosm of a relationship. Like there's different things happening in each of the songs, but they're all sort of optimistic. And it just sort of maybe could be the soundtrack to kind of a troubled but inspiring relationship.
Deadly. Yeah, it's not dissimilar to what I had.
Oh yeah.
I kept One Story Town because again, I like that sort of the immediacy of how quickly that one gets going and moves. You Got Lucky at 2, Deliver Me at 3. I put Keep a Little Soul in at 4 as well. I put Change of Heart next because again, I like that. Just keeping the tone of the songs a little bit separated, and then Keeping Me Alive. And I put that instead of Finding Out. I took Finding Out off, and I put Keeping Me Alive. And then that was side 1.
All right, so
that was my side 1.
I'll go through my side 2 then.
Yeah.
So can you go through your side one more time?
So I had One Story Town, You Got Lucky, Deliver Me, Keep a Little Soul, Change of Heart, Keeping Me Alive.
All right, so you left Deliver Me on side 1. All right, so my side 2, and it can't be finalized because it doesn't fit. I'm a nerd and I need to fit it on LP constraints. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I thought One Story Town would be a great side 2 opener, right into Between Two Worlds, and then Finding Out, and then Turning Point. So I thought those 4, and then you get into the last 3, and I probably have to cut 1 or 2 of these, but Deliver Me, I think, probably stays. And then 12 and 13, I'm trying to decide if I want to close with We Stand a Chance or A Wasted Life. It's tough. Like this, I think that speaks to what you started with, which is this is a really consistent album. So it's hard to cut. Like these are tough decisions. Sophie's Choice type decisions as to what, there's nothing that's clearly needs to go. So I have to kind of figure out how I would want to close this alternate playlist. What about your side too?
My side too is as is, honestly. Like I
okay.
I left it as is because I like all the songs, and like I said, I didn't put Turning Point in, so I didn't really need to take anything else out. So I only needed I took Finding Out out. But other than that, yeah, I kind of like the way that side 2 progresses and moves. And like I said, I like that lift after Straight Into Darkness of Same Old You, but I do like Same Old You as in spot 1 on side 1. Now that you said that, it's like, yeah, I think you're right on that.
I just ask you, and I'll send you a link to my playlist, but I ask you to listen to that side A and tell me that's not like up there. I think that's up there with Hard Promises and blanking on their biggest album, Damn the Torpedoes. I think it's up there with how that would grab the listener, given the addition of Keep a Little Soul and Keeping Me Alive, and then closing with Straight Into Darkness. I just think you got 6 really strong songs in a row there. So you would end up with what is it, 11 tracks on yours?
Yeah.
Because you're taking one off and adding 2? Okay.
Yeah, because I was looking if there's any way you could jimmy it, but it's 23 minutes is your hard limit with vinyl. Yeah. I was like, oh man, and it's literally like 25 seconds you're over. But
yeah, I think we could probably fudge that. You were talking about the outro on Between Two Worlds. Like I think there's ways to get these songs, whatever you wanted, to get it on there if you were willing to play with the song length a little bit. But I like, all in all, I really like this album more than I thought I would. You mentioned the artwork. I think it's really cool. It does look a little like the graphics on it. The album like logo, the name of the band looks a little dated, but I think it's of its time and from that respect. But I think it's a solid addition to his discography. And he did say that, this is a treading water album, and I think he wanted to do more with it. So I think the fact that we're kind of playing with the track list a little bit says there's some things that could have been improved, and certainly leaving those really strong tracks off makes that easy to make that judgment on it.
Well, it's funny because you say about the logo, it's one of the things that I like, and it's funny because that stuff's come back in now. That 80s neon vibe is really back in fashion now, and so when you look at it now, it's like, oh, that's actually pretty damn cool.
This could be a 2022 album.
It could be. It absolutely could. It could be Arcade Fire's new album cover, right? So.
Yeah, it could.
So just to finish up, though, with your side 2, so you got One Story Town, Between Two Worlds, Finding Out, Turning Point, Deliver Me. So did you end up... So and those are your 5 for sure?
I think those are my 5 for sure, and I'm trying to decide if I think I would rather finish with Wasted Life, but I think I would want a different recording of it. I don't know. Like I think you called it Calypso. I don't know if I like that on it.
It's got that kind of feel to it, yeah. That beach bum thing.
And then I think We Stand a Chance is a little too, as I mentioned, repetitive in the second half of that, where he's just saying it over and over again. I don't know if I want to close the album that way either. So I have some decisions to make.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know, dude. So you've got, I don't know time-wise, because Between Two Worlds, like we said, it is long, but you've also got Turning Point on there now, which shortens that up. So that actually might, if you're not putting on We Stand a Chance, you might be able to get away with one of those others. You might be able to get
12, right?
I think you might. I'll have to do the math once we're done, but I'll take a look.
My issue with We Stand a Chance is, and the reason it's a tough cut, is that the band, or at least Tom said that the band or the producers thought that was going to be a hit. So I'm just trying to hear what they heard in it.
Yeah,
I think it's probably my least favorite song on the album.
Yeah, that's funny, hey, where with those points of difference.
Yeah,
because we're both big fans and we both got, more or less fairly similar tastes in music. So the fact that I really, and it's funny because when I was writing my notes for this ep, I was thinking, oh man, I gave We Stand a Chance a 7. I think it might be an 8, but I was like, no, I should leave it as a 7.
It's not bad though.
No, it's not bad.
It's bad. I don't think it's bad. I think it's just there's just parts of it where I'm like,
right.
Let's move this along, or it's just I don't know. It's just not the one of his best of this era, and that's my issue with it. I think I don't know.
See, and I would on that side too. I would even just if you put in We Stand a Chance for Turning Point and finish with Deliver Me, that would work for me. But again, that's not my playlist, so.
Yeah, Turning Point. I think it's, I don't know. I think it's better than what you're giving credit for. But that's just maybe a difference of opinion. But I also really gravitate to this type of work for him. Like,
Yeah,
you love Wildflowers too, but
of course.
like this was him like dipping his toes into his roots, I think. And this is like, oh, I want to make, and they did. He did go and try to make a concept album about the
Yeah.
South after this. It didn't come together maybe exactly the way he wanted it to. We'll talk about that, but like you could see him trying to head this direction, which is a good direction. Sure. Is a really good direction for him.
For sure.
So
perfect. Okay, well, I think we've done a good job there. So now the last thing we got to do is our EP.
Yes.
And so I'm going to go first, and this one's tough because the way I've approached this one is I've definitely not gone for what I think are the 3 best songs. I'm trying to think about an encapsulation of the sound of this album and 3 songs that are my favorite songs off the album. And so Straight Into Darkness, without question, is on there. Change of Heart, because to me it's kind of like Listen to Her Heart. It's a perfect pop song. It's short, it's punchy, it's to the point, you can hum it, you remember it. And then Same Old You. I'm going to finish it with Same Old You because that song is just so much fun.
I was trying to think of what I was gonna cut to keep Same Old You on there. So you did include You Got Lucky.
Yeah.
All right, so I got to go ahead and do that. And now, where do these B-sides or unreleased tracks fall? Do they qualify?
They're fair game, absolutely. They're fair game.
Oh, well, then we have to include Keep a Little Soul. And let's just make it a 6-song EP and put Keeping Me Alive on there as well.
Well, we've differed on every single song though, which is the first time we've done that.
Well, I mean, obviously, I love Straight Into Darkness, but the fact that you picked it and we got an EP. I mean, I probably would, if I just had to pick 3 in a vacuum, I probably would go Straight Into Darkness, You Got Lucky, and then maybe the Same Old You. But I mean, I really like Change of Heart as well. So, but Keep a Little Soul though. I mean, it's tough. This is a tough one.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I'm really glad that when you listen back to this album, you kind of rediscovered it, and that's always nice. I've had some comments online and people saying the same thing where when they go back and listen to an episode and then they go back and listen to the song, they think, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about this song and I kind of like it. So that's kind of a neat thing to be able to throw back and look at that. And the same thing, I listened to an Aerosmith podcast and a Van Halen podcast, and it's the same thing. It's really sort of reignited my love of those 2 bands because you think, oh shit, yeah, those first couple of albums were great, or I'd forgotten about that song, whatever it is. So I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that's valuable to me to be able to add these songs to my, like specifically the Same Old You and Between Two Worlds, to add those to my playlist and to hear them more regularly now. It's just a nice added benefit of this podcast.
Awesome. Well, we will. I think we'll probably leave it there. Where can people find you on social media, John?
At 444_John on Twitter, for as long as Twitter is around. If we have to pivot to something else, I'll let you know. But that's my primary Twitter handle there.
I think we need to establish a Tom Petty Mastodon community now, just in case. So
just in case.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and people know where to find me. I'll put all my stuff in the episode notes. I'm sick of saying to find me on Twitter and Facebook, so I'm just not going to do it for this episode. It's all good. So yeah, thanks for listening, folks, and I'll be back next week to talk about the first track from Southern Accents, which is what? Rebels?
You had it right.
It is Rebels. Okay, good. I'm not losing my mind. That's it. Well, I am, but excellent. Okay, thank you very much. We're done. We're out. Awesome.
It was looser than I was a little confused at the start because you didn't introduce me. So I think in the previous times you had. So
cold open.
That's why I didn't know that we were recording. Like we were, you jumped right into the album facts, and I was like, well, wait a second, is this the podcast or not? I'm sure you can make it work.
Yeah, well, I'll do a pickup now just in case. I'll see where it flows, okay. But I'll just do it. So, well, I didn't even do a welcome to the episode, did I, or anything? So welcome to the episode wrap for Long After Dark.